Hello there, you explorers of the stars, and welcome back to Thorgiween, our week-long look at horror games long after everyone has already started thinking about Christmas. What's Thanksgiving? Never heard of it. And you know, this year's Thorgiween just hasn't felt right. Probably because it's taking place in November, but also because we just did 2 videos in a row on multiplayer live service games. That just doesn't feel right. I mean, it's a fine genre, but let's be real, live service games, they're not about scaring people, they're just about trying to make money. It's just people chasing trends to try and make an extra buck. Nah, we gotta do something special today. We gotta get back to the survival horror roots. That's why, on today's episode, I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Spice! How many people out there are old enough to actually know that reference? The indie scene has been pumping out some of the best survival horror experiences of the past decade. Games that harken back to classic titles, while also pushing the genre forward with new settings, characters, and ideas. And out of all these standout and innovative games, one that's really caught my attention is Signalis. This game released last year in October, and almost instantly I saw several big-name horror YouTubers talking about it. Something impressive for any indie game, but an especially big feat for first-time German studio Rose Engine, a studio made up of only 2 people. Barbara Whitman and Yuri Stern spent 8 years working on this game, so no matter what I end up thinking of it, I am so glad to see a passion project of this caliber being enjoyed by so many people. So let's suit up in our cyberpunk goth spacesuits and see what this game is all about. Signalis starts off with a warning, telling you that some parts of this game might be considered violent or cruel. Wait, cruel? Oh, this is going to be one of those upsetting horror games, not one of the fun horror games, isn't it? Well, after that, we cut to the inside of a spaceship with our protagonist Elster awakening from a deep sleep. Elster is a replicant, a humanoid android, and she finds herself to be all alone on this ship. From there, she heads out onto the frozen wasteland of a planet that she finds herself on, being drawn to a series of structures where she finds a base whose entrance is a giant hole in the ground with a shoddy string of steps spiraling south, only to lead to a small carved-out hole in the pink fleshy wall, and the only way through is to crawl into the darkness until you find— This is hell, isn't it? We found hell in space. This is like an Event Horizon situation. Hell is real, it's in outer space, and now we're descending down into it. Cool! Cool. I look forward to the rest of this game. Now you might be wondering why Elster would be so driven to travel down into what is probably the worst thing that you could find in space, and our only hint to that is a message that flashes on screen, saying that Elster needs to remember her promise. Ah, good. Anytime that survival horror game starts with someone going to a mysterious place because they need to keep a promise, you know it's going to be a good time. Just a barrel of laughs ahead of us. But upon crawling through this hole, Elster finds herself in a surprisingly normal office. There's a laptop, books, wooden furniture, more ominous books, and something about how normal this room is, deep inside this fleshy pit on a frozen wasteland, kinda sets up the tone of this entire game. Nothing is what it seems, and even if something looks normal and safe, you know it's locked deep inside of a nightmare. The game just knows how to feel so overwhelming and depressing and hopeless. And we just started it, so it's not going to get much better from here. From there, the game follows Elster as she begins exploring this underground base, which is littered with dead replicas. And as she explores, she finds very ominous notes warning her about walking in the halls. You know, where all the dead replicas are. And she even finds other survivors who don't seem to be handling this all that well. Now, you might think that I'm being vague so far, but that's just how the game is. There's nobody here to fill you in on everything that's happening. Even when you find other survivors, they might have a little information, but they're panicking as much as you are. And the ones who aren't panicking are the ones you probably want to avoid. In fact, the majority of the story in this game is revealed to you through notes that you find around the map. Just one of the many ways that this game serves as a tribute to classic survival horror. I've often heard people say that one of the things special about the Souls games is how they build up big lore through notes and scribblings that you find without anyone actually laying the story out for you. but I've always associated that more with survival horror games. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, they were always about finding yourself in a strange, unfamiliar location, and the only survivors there are either injured or crazy, and you have to piece the story together yourself from notes that you find. It's a great way to slowly build up a mystery while ramping up the tension by revealing one threat and twist after another. And while I will admit, the story of Signalis can be confusing. I mean, you're inside of a sci-fi game that's wrapped inside of a horror game. It's a big genre turducken that you're dealing with. So there's going to be a lot of terms and a lot of phrases that you're completely unfamiliar with when you start this game. But even with all that, I would still say that this game handles this concept brilliantly. When I saw those dead replicas, I knew what was coming. I knew they wouldn't stay dead for long. But when you actually read a note telling you not to run because that's how they find you, it just made the threat feel so much more real and present. Not to mention running into your first survivors who are already going through it. You see them and you realize they have seen some stuff. Some stuff that you too will be seeing soon. And soon will be seeing you. And sure enough, going back out into the hall, the replicas come to life with a horrendous screech and start lumbering towards you. And while they might not seem like much of a threat at first, the way that they move is so creepy, their screams are so chilling. It's that level of inhuman action and uncanny appearance that just makes you hate it, but hate it in the best way. And that's essentially the setup for the game. From there, Elster will keep digging deeper and deeper into this facility, looking for whatever it is that she's looking for. Again, the game likes to keep all its secrets close to its chest right before you need to know it. And the deeper she goes, the more the facility changes, becoming colder and sterile, more militaristic, and then just going full eldritch flesh pits. And the deeper you go, the more characters you'll meet, all of whom will have several notes dedicated to explain who they are and what they're doing here. But also, the bigger and meaner the enemies become. I won't go much further into the story, simply because, well, it's kind of hard to explain. This is one of those games where when it's over, you'll understand the big strokes, but you're going to need to go back and reread a couple of those notes a few times to fully dissect everything that's going on. But I will say that when everything was said and done, when this story wrapped up and I saw what this was all about, I was very satisfied with it. I had my mind bended inside and out, but at the core of everything, this was a heartbreaking story about many characters trapped in a prison built by the traumas they had endured. I won't go much deeper than that, but let's just say, yeah, there's a reason why they made sure to say cruel in that opening warning. This is a game that is going to hit some people really close to home. I will say though that I do really enjoy Elster, despite the fact that almost all of her past is kept a mystery and she doesn't talk to anyone, which... okay, yeah, that actually drove me nuts. She'll find multiple other characters hidden around these stages, and she never actually says anything to them. They'll respond like she's talking to them, but she doesn't. And it's not like she's a voiceless protagonist. It's not like we're just supposed to fill in the blanks with our imagination. No, there are story-specific cutscenes where she does talk to other characters. In these mandatory cutscenes, she does have a voice. But when she just finds someone bleeding out on the floor, she doesn't say a word to them even though they're trying to talk to her. And I don't know why they didn't want to give her some dialogue in these scenes. It's just kind of a weird decision to me. But beyond that, when you do actually get to see Elster showing some emotions, when you do actually see why she's doing everything, you can't help but feel for her. And speaking of Elster's character, I love that this game has multiple endings, but the endings aren't decided by you choosing A or B 10 hours into the game. No, it's based on how fast you beat the game, but also on how many enemies you end up killing. I love that because not only does it place weight on all of your decisions as you're playing the game, but also it adds sort of a level of karma to these endings, like, oh, you killed a whole bunch of your fellow replicas? Well, guess who's about to get the bad ending? But if I can't go any deeper into the story, let's actually talk about the gameplay and the presentation. I mentioned that all the big survival horror YouTubers out there were praising this game last year, and upon playing it, it's easy to see why. The old school survival horror themes go far beyond just the pixelated aesthetic and vague ominous lore notes. The game leans heavily into item management, puzzle solving, and threatening individual enemies and overbearing atmosphere instead of big crazy boss fights and action sequences. This is far more of Resident Evil 1 than Resident Evil 4. This game is essentially divided into 3 or 4 acts, with each act spotlighting a different area of the compound. You'll have to explore each area, finding locked doors that can be opened by finding keys or codes, which can be obtained in a few ways, typically snatching them from rooms full of enemies or by solving puzzles, and the puzzles feel like just the right level of out there and eccentric for a survival horror game. You never want your survival horror game to feel like you're just connecting the dots. No, you always want your audience to walk away from a survival horror puzzle saying, "Who the hell thought of this?" And I never had to look up the answers for any of these puzzles, but I did feel like an idiot for a couple of them, and I was scratching my head for a good while trying to brute force them. Which is exactly how a lot of those old survival horror games felt. And there's a ton of variety in these puzzles. Sometimes you have to identify something hidden right in front of your face. Then you'll have to flip switches to hit a certain number. But then there's also a radio that you have access to that you can use for puzzle solving by tuning it to certain frequencies. So even if these puzzles could be frustrating, they never got old. But as you get these keys and codes, you'll unlock more rooms to explore, which is another thing that has in common with older survival horror games. There was always a dash of Metroidvania in their progression. Although, I do have a slight problem with how this game handles that. The beginning and end of the game handle it pretty well, but during the middle section of the game, there's this big area that you have to explore that goes over multiple floors, and each floor has tons of locked rooms. But typically, the way you want to do a survival horror map is that each time that you open up a new room, you open up a new area to explore. Maybe not like an entire new map, but a handful of rooms, maybe a hallway in there. But it felt like with this middle part of the game, I had already explored the entire area before I finally found the first key to unlock something. And that would just unlock a room that would just have a key in there to unlock another room. So for essentially about a third of this game, it was just following the pattern of, I open a room, get the key, walk all the way back to another room, unlock it, find the key in there, walk all the way back to another room, unlock it, find the key in there, walk all the way back to another room, unlock it, find the key in there, and so on and so on. Don't get me wrong, I was still enjoying myself, it just became a bit tedious for that stretch. But it was still incredibly tense because this game knows how to make sneaking around the map feel like a life or death struggle. The enemies that you find across the game are all replicas who have been infected with, I'm going to say, Space Satan? Yeah, let's go with that. And as the game goes on, you'll encounter newer, stronger, more disturbing replicas. And the way they're paced out is done perfectly. In the beginning, I was having no problem with any of them and was able to take down almost everyone that I came across. But towards the end of the game, I would run into a room with 3 or 4 superpowered opponents who I had no shot against and had to carefully sneak around them, knowing that any slip-up would mean game over. And that's just the enemies you'll fight with normal weapons. This game knows how to mess with you because sometimes you'll find an enemy that just lumbers at you like a zombie, but then you'll turn around and run into a creature that crawls out of the floor while you're trying to avoid invisible razor wiring, and then you just walk into a room and find whatever the hell this is. I don't know if I have ever noped out of a situation faster than when I first saw these things. You can beat them by tuning your radio to the exact frequency that they're showing on screen to find which one of them is real, but yeah, I didn't want to spend the time doing that because that meant more time that I would have to spend near them, so I just started blasting. And as you can tell from all that, this is probably the game's biggest positive, the atmosphere. That opening sequence of you descending into a mysterious fleshy pit lets you know you'll be seeing disturbing images throughout this game, but the way that it becomes more twisted, the music becomes more intimidating, the enemies become more rotted, the locations and puzzles and notes become more demented. This entire game just nails that feeling of dread. It just feels so German. It's a German video game made with German horror aesthetics. That's really the best way that I can sum it up. But all jokes aside, it's got this overbearing feeling of anxiety and terror that keeps building up until it just feels overwhelming and hopeless. If Dead Space was Resident Evil 4 in space, Signalis is Silent Hill in space. Well, at least the first Silent Hill. Full disclosure, I know everybody says that the second Silent Hill is the best one, but I never actually ended up finishing it. I started playing it, but then got distracted and just never returned to it, so I don't know. I'm just bringing this up because if you guys want us to play it, then maybe we could do it next year for Thorgiween. I do really want to see where the story goes. I like that James Sunderland guy. Hope his wife is okay. However, despite the amazing tone this game has, the excellent progression of scares, and how well it captures the mystery of an old survival horror game, there's one other element of older horror games that this one attempts to bring back, and I don't think it does it very well. Item management. Yes, part of the dread of older survival horror games is that you would have limited inventory space, so even if there were a lot of items around you, you'd still have to be extra careful about what you decide to bring with you. It would force you to make tough decisions about what you did or did not pick up. But to keep that feeling stressful and not annoying, you would need to find a balance. You would need to find a way to keep players mostly satisfied with what they had on them, only making them have to worry about that inventory size every now and again, and never forcing the player to do too much running back and forth for items. And I hate saying this, but I don't think Signalis finds that balance because the inventory management in this game is hair-rippingly frustrating. You only have 6 spots in your inventory and there is no way to increase that. So you'll want to carry around a weapon with you, so that's 1 spot. Then you'll need ammo for that weapon. That's 2. Then you're going to be unlocking doors and using other special items to solve puzzles, so you'll need to carry those keys or other items with you, so that's 3. Then you're going to want at least 1 healing item on you at all times, so that's 4. That means that just carrying the bare essentials, you only have 2 spots left in your inventory. But then there are so many spots in this game that require you to have a flashlight on you because otherwise it is impossible to see where you're going. And that flashlight snaps right onto your shoulder. It mounts right there for easy convenience, and yet it still for some reason takes up an item slot because I guess you store your inventory on your shoulder as well? Like you have some big Rob Liefeld pouch up there? So now that's 5 out of your 6 slots all reserved just for the essentials. You only have 1 free slot. And I know some people are going to say, hey, in the first Resident Evil, Chris only had 6 inventory slots. Yes, he did, but I don't remember him needing a slot just for a flashlight. And in the original Resident Evil, there weren't nearly as many items that you needed to pick up. And that's where the frustration really comes into play. Healing items and ammunition are a little rare, but they're not that hard to find. You walk around enough, you'll find what you need. But you won't have anywhere to put it. I would constantly go into a room, use up a key to enter it, so now I had 2 inventory spots. But then I would have to pick up a brand new key that I found in there, leaving me with only 1 slot. And there would be 3 or 4 more items just scattered around that room. So I would end up having to run all the way back to the inventory box, drop some stuff off, then run back, get the new items, run back to the inventory box, drop off the new items, get my essentials back, and that became the ongoing pattern for basically the last half of this game. And I didn't even mention all the other stuff that you need to carry around. There's multiple weapons in this game, and that's great. There's a good variety to them, and I like how you unlock them. You have to solve some puzzles, or you have to collect a bunch of items and put them all together. But I never wanted to carry more than 1 weapon at a time just because I didn't have the space. Heck, I mentioned that some weapons and other items you have to get by combining other items together. That's how you get a lot of the major progression items in this game. Guess what? That means you need multiple things in your inventory at once just to create that 1 new item. So that's more running back to the inventory box to drop stuff off, so that way you can run back to the final piece that you need to unlock the other piece that's in your inventory, and it's just so frustrating. And as you're running back and forth, you'll still have to worry about all those enemies. You can sneak past them, but sometimes that's not an option, so you'll have to fight. But in a nice callback to the early Resident Evil remake, a lot of the enemies will resurrect themselves after a while, with that resurrection timer getting shorter and shorter as the game goes on, until eventually you can kill an enemy, leave the room, come right back into that room, and they're already back on their feet. But there are items that you can get to help with that, such as a stun baton that instantly puts the enemy down, or a flare that you can use to burn away the enemy after it's been defeated to make sure that it never comes back again. But now, that's even more items that you have to carry in your inventory, and unlike ammo or healing items, these special equipable items can't be discarded. You can only use them or put them in the inventory box. So if you're in a spot where you really need an item, and you know you don't need your stun rod because you have a dozen of them in your storage box back in the save room, too bad. You can't discard that stun rod no matter how much you might want to. Just gotta run all the way back to the inventory and drop it off in the box before running all the way back, and boy, I sure hope that enemy I just killed isn't already back. Signalis nails so much about what made older survival horror games special, what made them tense and frightening and challenging games. But this is the one big black spot on its nearly perfect record. I don't really give games scores, but if I did have to give this one a score, it'd be a 9 out of 10. And I can't go any higher than that, and it's almost entirely because of how inventory is handled. This is the one thing where it felt like they were reaching for those older game mechanics, and they missed. However, I can't stress this enough. They nailed everything else. The inventory management is keeping me from wanting to play this game again, but I am so glad I played through it once. Despite this one problem area, the rest of this game gets a huge recommendation from me, and if you're looking for something different with a totally unique tone and story, but still similar mechanics to what you might be missing from older games, Signalis is a must-play. Signalis is one of those games that had been on my radar for a long time, and after finally playing it, I'm happy to say it did not disappoint. Yes, it does have that one glaring problem with the inventory management, but aside from that, the rest of the gameplay matches older survival horror games perfectly. And that, combined with the emotional story, and the unique setting, and the twisting, haunting tone, makes this a truly special game, and I'm so glad that these two indie developers were able to make something that could speak to so many players out there, and it's exploded and has received all kinds of attention. So, let me know what you thought of Signalis, or, you know what? Let's just get some good indie horror talk going down there in the comments. What's another indie horror game that you've really enjoyed? Go ahead, use the comments down there to promote it. I always like to help out indie devs, just spread the word however you can. So let me know what you think about this game or other indie horror games out there that you want to promote down in the comments. And you can also contact me on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky. I'm pretty much everywhere. Just check the description down there. But thank you guys very much for tuning in. We're nearing the end of Thorgiween this year, so if you want to see the rest of the videos we have planned, make sure that you click that subscribe button and come back tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, screw this. I actually did wreck my voice doing that Tim Curry impersonation at the beginning of this video. So for all the people out there who keep seeing me holding mugs in these videos and you're thinking like, oh, that's just a prop, you're just doing that to hold something in your hand. No, I destroy my voice whenever I have to record, so there is actually water in these cups. Okay, there we go. Much better. All right, let's try this again. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Stay safe out there, and happy Halloween. Nailed it.
Dunkin' Donuts is proud to announce we've created a monster. Introducing a haunting collection of minis for Halloween.
Radio Shack is the place people go for specialty batteries for...
Pod you'll find on 2 liters of Pepsi. For details, visit a Pepsi display near